We have some very exciting breaking news. President Trump made a decision on his chief of staff, at least temporarily. Just tweeting this out moments ago, I'm pleased to announce that Mick Mulvaney, director of the Office of Management and Budget, will be named acting White House chief of staff. Acting, notice that word, replacing General John Kelly, who has served our country with distinction. Mick has done an outstanding job while in the administration. I look forward to working with him in this new capacity as we continue to make America great again. John will be staying until the end of the year. He is a great patriot, and I want to personally thank him for his service. Now, I should mention, Mick Mulvaney has two very important jobs. One, he's the head of OMB, Office of Management and Budget. He deals with that $3.5 trillion monstrosity known as our national budget. The other thing he does is handle the Bureau of Consumer Financial Affairs. This is the bureau that was started by Liz Warren, and in itself is a bureaucratic monstrosity by some accounts. But he handles both of these organizations. He's done so pretty well. So, gang, what do you think about moving him over to chief of staff?
First off, what he was running monstrosity is being nice. Look, I like the guy. I love his interviews. He knows his stuff. I just have one simple message to the man. Discipline. The White House needs discipline. It needs better, consistent messaging. Good luck.
He's known as the Axe Man. He's all about cutting in government spending. His personality is always what gets me. He seems so upbeat. So I'm curious how he's going to drive home a hard message, control everything, and then still have that smile. Will he have that smile when he eventually is done as chief of staff? And then who replaces him at OMB?
OMB or the other organization, the Bureau of Financial Affairs. Go ahead, Danielle.
I'm curious to see what I would have loved to have seen Elizabeth Warren's reaction to this appointment, but not to be a wet bag of mice. I don't want to be a Debbie Downer for a minute, but we have to recall a big survey came out yesterday that showed that 48.6% of chief financial officers in this country believe we're going into recession in 2019. What better person to have as your right-hand man than Mick Mulvaney? He has a deep understanding, experience. Prior to going into government, he had experience in business and real estate. You want somebody who has a great foundation, understands the economy, understands how businesses work if the U.S. economy is truly heading into a slowdown.
So I'll say something else kind about him. He also has experience in electoral politics, actually more than the president has, and that's a good thing in this role. But we need to keep in mind the president has chewed up and spit out anyone in this job before, and he will do the same thing to Mick Mulvaney. I would say Mick Mulvaney is the patriot for taking on this this assignment.
Well, there's another patriot that we're going to bring on right now, a guy who works for us, Chad Pergram, who's the senior Capitol Hill producer, a guy who knows everything about what goes on inside the Beltway. His name, Chad, had been put forward by a number of different people, but everybody thought he's so indispensable where he is with the OMB and with the Liz Warren monstrosity, as I keep calling it. I mean, how can he be replaced?
I had been getting some very subtle hand signals for some time now that he might be in the offing to be the chief of staff, now going to be the acting chief of staff. He knows Capitol Hill. He has strong relations with the House Freedom Caucus, the arch conservative group up here on Capitol Hill, which he helped found when he was a Republican congressman from South Carolina. And you know, this is key. You know, if we're going to go into this potential government shutdown a week from now, having someone as conservative as Mick Mulvaney, who's tied with the Freedom Caucus, that could spark a shutdown right there if he's whispering in the president's ear. Yeah, this is something that folks on the left and people who are opposed to the wall certainly won't like. But he does know his way around Capitol Hill, which is something that the president is definitely going to need.
I want to on the shutdown. I've gone through the past, going back to the 70s. The most, I think 21 days was the most. The average is 1 to 3 days. Do you have a feel on whether in the back channels things are coming together to where they can get something done, and if there is a shutdown, it'll end very quickly?
Well, we got a little bit of a tip this afternoon that there might be some behind-the-scenes negotiating on a 2-week interim spending bill to get them through Christmas, get them through the new year when the Democrats take over the House of Representatives on January 3rd. This would go to January 4th. But that seems to be dead in the water. First of all, there was one top Democratic aide who said to me, well, that means that President Trump loses twice. He doesn't get his wall in December, and he's certainly not going to get it in January. You're right about the length of these government shutdowns. We've never quite had a government government shutdown with a new Congress coming in. We have had them over the holidays, though. In 1995, December, into early 1996, they had a partial government shutdown. There was a series of 3 in this big standoff between President Clinton and then House Speaker Newt Gingrich. But each time they had one of those shutdowns, they opened up a little more of the government. They passed some appropriations bills. So this could be a similar model to what we saw in late 95 and 96.
Chad, what do you make of the messaging of this shutdown? You know, we had one back in January, and if you ask me, the Republicans messaged and owned that shutdown very effectively. But this time the president wants to take credit for it instead of blaming the Democrats in their messaging. What do you make of that?
Well, you know, a few weeks ago, President Trump said to incoming House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, if she needs the votes, I can help her out. Well, after that meeting at the White House on Tuesday, guess what? He helped her out. If there was any question among Democrats that she didn't have the juice to be Speaker of the House after that meeting, she picked up the extra votes there.
But let me just throw in a couple of things to be contrarian here. One is that markets have actually done pretty well. The last 3 government shutdowns, markets have reacted positively during the duration of the shutdown. The last time the market was up 3%. The other thing is that there was a big shutdown recently that happened just before a midterm election. And even though Republicans had been targeted as responsible for the shutdown, they won that election. So the argument can be made that the shutdown might not be political kryptonite, right?
Right. And sometimes, you know, we're at the furthest point away right now from the next election. You know, we are 23 months. So if you're going to have a shutdown, who remembers? You referenced the shutdown in 2013 over defunding Obamacare. Well, guess what? The Republicans won control of the Senate.
Exactly.
But here's the key thing. I wonder what the optics are going to look like. You know, if the government is shut down and the president has said, I'm going to take the mantle, you can imagine the political cartoonists, you know, the Grinch who stole Christmas, you know, a heart 2 sizes too small, all of the different narratives that play into the holidays there. The Democrats will eat that up, especially since the president already.
And by the way, when I saw them in the
I'll play
White
contrarian. Gary, I'll play contrarian to that. I think the voters who support President Trump, I think he's fine with this because he's carrying through on a campaign promise that he shouted about at his rallies. He's going to build that wall, and if he can't, and whatever that means, by the way, because $1 billion, $5 billion, who cares? I just don't think his voters are going to blame him for that.
And you're right, and that's an interesting point. You know, and I talked to one very senior conservative congressman yesterday who said, you know, he's always going to be stuck in the 40s, so he probably doesn't care. Here's the flip side of that. There have been a lot of Republicans in the House of Representatives who have said that they didn't think that the GOP got the message of the midterm election, losing control of the House of Representatives, because this type of issue and that kind of braggadocio and confrontational politics, that works in red America. But in, you know, these suburban districts, especially with female voters, the fights over the wall, that doesn't work out. And that's why they think that they are whistling past the graveyard in the post-mortem of what happened in the midterm elections, especially among House Republicans.
Chad, what if we get a deal for a wall and something for DACA and Dreamers? Does that get us what both sides want? Can they agree to that?
I specifically asked House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi that a week and a half ago, and I I said, what if you got you know, a DACA deal, a permanent bona fide deal for some degree of wall money? And she was emphatic. She said, absolutely not. I think she believes she has the upper hand here. At that point, she said these issues are not connected, and especially since the president, you know, took claim, you know, there's no reason for her to deal. You know, one might wonder how much this does hamstring her in early January when they get control of the House of Representatives. I asked Pelosi that yesterday, and she said, well, how long would this shutdown go on? Would it go on forever? And that's why some people think maybe there's this back channel effort to put out this fire pretty quickly and at least have an interim spending bill to avoid a shutdown at Christmas.